That sounds great.
All right, so citizens, it is a pleasure to have you here, and I am honored to be among the presence of official Dauntless staff. This is going to be an interview talking about all things Dauntless and the state of the game as it stands of the Frostfall event here in the early months of 2018. And we'll be discussing what has been done, what will be done to all greater extent without having fortune-telling powers, and taking some questions from the chat, and talking about all things Dauntless and all things Dauntless community. I am joined by the lead community manager, Ian Tornay, also known as Crash, correct?
That's it.
All right, and he is Phoenix Lab staff, and we'll be chatting this evening, so if you hear a disembodied voice on stream, that is exactly who it is. How are you doing today, Mr. Tornay?
I am doing well now that I am here in your regal presence, my liege.
I am honored. I am honored. So I also have Dauntless opened up, and one thing that I've noticed is I don't think I've added you to my friends list.
Well, that's a crime. Let's remedy that.
I know. Is your in-game name the same as your username?
Yes.
Okay. I will add you thusly, and I assume probably an ocean of other invites will probably now reach your shore.
That is just fine.
All right. Party invite sent. I'll also friend invite you. Awesome. So how are you doing today, sir? I know that things are getting busy for most studios around now, right? With, I think,
yes.
E3 coming up, and PAX South is coming up as well.
Yeah, so we're absolutely getting ready for PAX South. In fact, I'll be flying out tomorrow to head over to Texas. Hopefully see some of you guys there. And it's going to be a great show. It's first show of the year. It's the first show after the Sharpen Your Skills update, which we're using as a really big opportunity to get more feedback about the game. Going forward, I think Dauntless is in a place now where we've learned enough about how people play. We've learned enough about how the game works, that we're excited to kind of build upon what we see as a pretty solid foundation. So going forward, there's going to be more experiments, there's going to be more content, there's going to be more to do. Really just more Dauntless and more great ways to play.
Oh, that's great. That is super exciting. So when you go to a convention, what is that experience normally like for you as a member of the staff that's generally boots on the ground?
Yeah. So I always enjoy going to gaming conventions. As someone obviously who's a gamer myself, it's always inspiring. It's a really great way to recharge your batteries. Making games usually comes with pretty long hours. There's a lot of stuff that goes on leading up to the convention, and that there's a lot of work you're going to have to get caught up on before you or when you get back. But in the meantime, it's great just to be there. It's great to see some friends who maybe work at other companies or who are just visiting. It's great to catch up with members of your own community. And what's really, really amazing is seeing people play the game. So, we can see people play on Twitch. We can see people play who are playing in the office. We have these stats. But there's kind of no replacement for that interaction you get when you're standing next to someone and you can read their body language and they can talk to you and they can ask you questions. And, it's amazing how much you can learn just by standing next to someone while they're playing a game.
I completely agree. I agree. And as a community member, the first time that I ever got a chance to play Dauntless was at PAX East, I believe, this previous year. Yes. And I noticed that you all, as staff, handled things a little bit differently. You were very attentive, you were very communicative, and you were very enthusiastic and genuinely interested in feedback. And you could see that feedback was being gathered on the spot, which I've been to a few conventions, to say the very least, and that is not always the case, as one matter of fact. So kudos in that regard. It definitely made the difference for me, even in my first early experiences.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think that that experience you may have had in other booths or with other games, a lot of us, a lot of people that work at the studio have been in the industry for a long time. I'm coming up on 10 years myself. And I think that, I've worked for companies where it's like, okay, get people in the booth, let them play, get them out, get the next people in, let them play, get them out. And there's not really an emphasis placed on that interaction, on getting that feedback, because you're kind of like, look, this is the demo. It is what it is. You're going to play it. You're either going to like it or you're not. But for us, it's so much more than that. Like, now that we have our own company, it's about actually taking the time, having the opportunity, and really relishing the opportunity to interact with people and to go and be a human being, which I think makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, I agree. So I just queued up for Nezaga. Is that good for you? That's good for you?
We're going to find out. I might get one hit, but if I don't get hit at all, I can't get one hit.
That's true. That's true. That is very observant. So furthermore, one thing that I always really like to ask developers is kind of, how did this game come to fruition to the point where it is now? Meaning, how did this idea get executed upon? When did it move? When did it come up as an idea and a sparkle in someone's eye? And then how long did it take to actually start executing, like creating models, typing code, and even how far from today was that? So the kind of 3-step process. It's a twinkle in someone's eye, and then, all right, prototype is made, and all right, we're incorporated. Like, how were those 3 steps done, and how long have you been involved in that?
So my understanding is that the studio formed about 3.5 years ago, and the first kind of line of code for the game was about 3 years ago. I started about 1.5 years ago, maybe
Nice.
even longer than that now, maybe about 1 3/4 years. At the point at which it was like it was feasible to have need for a community manager because the game was coming together. I think so. A lot of the people who started at the company first came from Riot, and knew the power of cooperative experiences, online experiences, and competitive experiences. But I think also saw an opportunity for games that were free to play, because it's great to get people from all over the world. It's an amazing opportunity to build a huge community and really change the face of gaming. And then maybe lean a little bit more into PvE instead of PvP. PvP is fun, and it comes with its own benefits and its own challenges, but we wanted to make a PvE game. Early on, there was an idea of what kind of game it was going to be. So was it going to be a shooter? Was it going to be an action game? Was it going to be what even is the genre? And we knew that we wanted to work with really talented people. We knew that we wanted to try something new and kind of push boundaries. So we're all really big Magic the Gathering fans. We actually have a Magic the Gathering club in the office where we play and have tournaments. And card games were kind of picking up. But I think that even from the beginning, we knew that we wanted to make something that maybe was a little more engrossing or creatively than a card game. Not that card games aren't artistic accomplishments, but I think when you have a 3D game, when you have a game where you can interact with a world, that's where you kind of start to get into some really exciting creative territory. So we knew that we wanted to make a 3D game. We knew that we wanted to work with some an engine that would give us the power to do that. So we went, we was like, okay, so we're talking about probably like an engine like Unreal. We're talking about a pretty involved project. And from there, it was really just getting down to genre. So we looked at shooters, we looked at action adventure. And part of what happened is that a lot of people in the studio, while these conversations were going on, were playing games like Dark Souls, were playing games like Monster Hunter. And, these are great games that have these huge audiences and can let you play for, a year without doing the same thing twice. And we're like, wow, what a really, really cool experience that would be to bring to people. But one of the things we quickly discovered was that while we knew that these experiences were great, we kind of had a hard time convincing other people to play just because of the learning curve being so steep. And
Really?
so kind of what we endeavored to do was make this genre a little bit more accessible. And I think everything kind of grew out of that.
That is really, really cool. See, one thing that I really like about this, and when you take a look at exploits like that, I mean, planning a large project, and you have to do market research, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I think, it's a delicate balance because you have to do market research. Is there a market for a game based on silent films that are turn-based card tactics games? Yeah, maybe. But is that market, is that market for people? Yeah, probably. So, but at the same time, you also know that you're going to be working on this game for 3 years, 4 years, hopefully for, the next 20 years.
Yep.
And so that, at the same time, it's like, is there a market for free-to-play card games? Yes, very, very much so. but is that the kind of game you want to be working on for the next 20 years? Maybe not. So you have to find the intersection between your passion and the market.
Right. Yes. I think that's beautifully put. So one thing that you touched on that I really want to touch on that seems to be part of the open discourse of this community as a whole, and it's a reoccurring one that kind of burns my biscuits, if you will.
Sure.
You mentioned working on a game for 20 years. It's a thing. World of Warcraft is very, very old these days, and it's a game that constantly evolves. And it doesn't need a massive engine update to be fun, and that's okay. And what I'm trying to say is that often when this game is discussed as a burgeoning game, I just noticed that I can't take certain actions when I'm doing push to talk. So this is going to be some embarrassing gameplay.
That's okay. I am also. I had to reset my character for testing purposes, and I am savagely undergeared for this as well.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll turn it down a notch. We can do some tier 1 stuff or such. I see you have Skarn. Let's do Skarn or finish that set out or something, good. Right?
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, so yeah, that's one thing that I cannot stress enough to those constituents who come into the stream, is that this is a living, breathing, evolving organism. And what you see is basically square one. And it's pre-square one officially. Let's be honest. It is closed beta. It is pre-square one. And the fact that there is a closed gameplay loop of this polish in a game that is so early in its life blows me away. And
thank you.
I think people forget that, and it really, like I said, it really rubs me the wrong way, because there are certain things that come with a PC game that don't always come with a console type game, and it's an ever evolving patch, and it's an ever evolving goal for the game. If you move yourself to the end of the yardstick for a online multiplayer PC game, then you just move the yardstick 50 more yards out and then go there. You continuously drive towards new goals that are being prioritized from the community. At least that's what the status quo is.
Right.
And so people forgetting that really blows my mind, because I feel like a lot of that comes from this being a pretty dominant genre on what would be consoles or handhelds. And in those cases, I don't know if that's always true, because I'm a PC gamer. I don't know how well that holds up to being true in those platforms.
I think you're dead. Right. I think, it's interesting that you discuss the concept of, console versus PC, and it's something that we've noticed too, right? I mean, obviously we're pursuing a genre that traditionally has been more console focused. So we do get a lot of people who play console games. And we see a lot of people coming over from console games, like there's a lot of overlay between Warframe and both on console and PC. So like we actually get a lot of Warframe players. And to your point, the concept of beta on console, largely revolves around multiplayer. And I think that it's unfortunate that the concept of beta has been kind of diluted due to games marketing, where it's like, okay, beta is a time where the game is basically done and we're just testing the servers and trying to trick you into pre-ordering, right? Like that's what a lot of people use beta for. And in reality, a true beta, which is what we're running, is a time for experimentation. It's a time for learning. It's a time for failing. It's a time for learning from failure. It's a time for trying crazy things, and it's a time for gathering feedback. I don't hold it against anyone though who is frustrated, because we need that feedback. We need to know where those pain points are. And I think that we have so much to do, but we're so excited to do it because we get this great feedback from the community. And it's just such an amazing opportunity that I think that all of us are excited to have. Again, coming from these big companies where it's like, well, because of marketing, you got to get the game out the door and it's got to be perfect on day one. And, we just got to get them to spend $60 and then who cares? It's like, no, we're on the hook here. Like, it's free to play. If we don't compel people to play this game with an amazing experience, we're not going to make ends meet. And while that can be scary, it's also a challenge that all of us are really excited about, because then we know that if we succeed, it's because we made something that is really special to people. And that we'd much rather be doing that than anything else. That is
very inspiring and heartening. That's like exactly what I would want to hear. First of all, you can queue up. It passed lead over to you.
Oh, cool.
Yep. So feel free to queue. And then furthermore, I'm going to actually alt-tab for a second and show everybody on stream one thing that really also one of two things that really set this company aside for me in the eyes of looking through my eyes at other game companies is what I'm trying to say. You really set yourselves apart by publishing a public roadmap and updating it regularly. And I have it bookmarked. I'm going to alt tab here. I'm going to find a web browser tab appropriate here and open it up. Sorry, 1 second.
Yep, take your time. We'll hold the airship as long as you need.
There it is. Okay, so for those of you who do not know, this is a little thing called Trello, and it is a agile / Kanban tracking board, and it is very, very good for kind of watching things and keeping track of projects and their entirety on a shared public space. So basically, this is going to be look at things as in the left side of this board as things that have been released, and look at things on the right side of this board as things that are on the backlog. And a backlog can be infinitely long, and it can be feedback from all areas. You know, it can be user feedback, it can be dev feedback, it can be community manager feedback. Any role is allowed to submit a story to the backlog. And one thing that is really, really nice about this is they have an entire section here dedicated toward player feedback. So I've never seen I've seen a game company execute on some player feedback sometimes, but I've never seen a game company do a full end-to-end backlog and actively update it. Furthermore, I've never seen them separate out player feedback, which that means your ideas are getting into the game. They're on the radar. You can check their progress. So let's see here. Here's one, dailies, weeklies, aka recon. If you are super duper interested in this particular topic and its progression into the game, just click the follow button on it. You can follow this and get an update every time there's activity on this card. Like a comment, if there is a change of its status to deployed, you will see it, you'll get an email. It's worth it because, I don't know, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen a dev really do. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really important to us that we tried to be as transparent as we could be. And really the only thing that holds us back from showing more is just our own internal planning. So like right now, if you look at the roadmap, there's a ton of stuff on deck. And the reason it's on deck is because we gathered a ton of feedback during Frostfall. We're trying to figure out, okay, what needs to be in the game to go into open beta? What do we need to do to make this game, completely rock solid? And for this entire month, that's what we're deciding. We've got a new team structure. We're making plans. We're looking at the horizon. And as soon as we know what's coming down the pike, as soon as we know in Firmament what's going to be in that list of open beta qualifiers, you're going to see, like you said, those things are going to move over into in development, and you're going to be able to get updates on those things. So the only thing that prevents us from adding anything to the roadmap is if we're not 100% sure it's going to happen. But as soon as we are fairly certain it's going to happen, you're going to see it there. You're going to see it get updated. And again, we've come from companies where the traditional wisdom is, under promise and over deliver. But we feel like the best way to get community feedback is to try to meet people exactly halfway. Say, hey, this is what we're hearing from you. This is the kind of feedback that works. This is what's valuable. And then encouraging that by honoring it, by interacting with it, and then executing on a solution.
Yep, that sounds like the dream. That sounds like something different and refreshing. It really does. And I mean, anybody who's involved in this community already knows that to be true. Anybody on the fence, it's true. Spoiler alert. Everything is handled much differently than you might expect. When I first started using the subreddit daily here, and I'm still really excited and waiting for the subreddit to blow up because it's a daily reader for me, and I try to comment as often as I can to help it. And the thing is, you're always on everything. That's the crazy part. You comment on everything. And I mean not just the main thread, but any subthreads that develop inside of the main post, you will comment on that too. And that's just great. That's really good. So that's just encouragement for all of you to become a little bit more involved and join the subreddit and, type in there and put your feedback in there, because it's being read, it's being heard.
100% being read and heard. And what we're going to start doing too is that it's probably going to be every other week to start, but going forward, not only will, are we looking at feedback there, not only will we be updating the roadmap, but you'll start to see a thread every 2 weeks, and again, eventually every week, where it's about the impact that your feedback is having inside the studio. So I prepare a report for the studio. Most of the people in the studio interact with the community and read and play and do all these things. But my job as community manager is to kind of get all that feedback in one place and to turn it into action for the studio. And what I do is I try to prepare reports that say, hey, this is what people are talking about. This is what we can do. And then we have a conversation about what we're going to do, how we feel, what we're like. Someone says so like one of the things that a lot of people talk about is bleed damage. Like there's some kind of problems with bleed damage, and so it's like, okay, well, this is what the community thinks about bleed damage. It's not perfect. What do we think about bleed damage, and what are we maybe going to do to change it and update it? And then every other week or so, I'm going to come back to Reddit, the forums, and everywhere else and say, okay, this is the feedback that we heard from you over the last 2 weeks, and this is what we're doing about it. And so you'll actually see those things grow and change over time. And part of that is because if you guys are going to take the time to give us the feedback, then we're going to take the time to show you that we're acting on it. And the other thing, too, is that I want to really encourage people like you who take the time to engage, and the other people on the subreddit and the forums and other locations who really take time out of their day to play the game. I want to reward them by saying, hey, look, when you do this, it made a difference. Because I think so often you talk to a developer, you participate in a forum or a subreddit, and you're like, I have this really cool idea, or I'm having a problem, or I have a concern, and you hear back, yep, and then you have no idea whether or not it's ever going to change.
Yep. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. I think that's so great. I'm so excited. Actually.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So to go back to what we were discussing previously, because we are getting a good gist of how awesome the community is. To go back to what we talked about earlier, when the game was in its burgeoning status and there was the market research going on, and you were trying to pick a plot of land to claim a stake in, so to speak. With that, and with choosing a genre, because I know as a streamer, when you choose to play a game, it generally tends to be kind of some sort of a constraint, but also you can play the game in a unique way and put a little spin on it, so to speak. And so with the genre that you've chosen, I think that this game has done a really good job of being how does one say, an ideal representation of the genre. And I see that there are many things in the roadmap to push it further down the line to make it exemplary, right? Like,
right.
To get it and push it beyond. And furthermore, I wonder, and this is a personal hope, are you going to try to put a spin on the genre? Is that ever something that you guys discussed? I know you can't speak of details, but is that something that's appreciated by the design planning team or whomever?
Oh, absolutely. I think what we get ideas that are completely crazy. We get ideas that come from a variety of genres, from a variety of gamers who are passionate about those genres. Like one of the things you'll see, like with one of the tougher behemoths, Rezakiri, is that he's actually inspired by bullet hell games, by bullet hell shmups, right? And so we're not afraid to mash up genres. We're not afraid to draw inspiration from what might be seen as untraditional sources. And so I think that that's how these conversations begin. What I tell people who have really amazing ideas is that are maybe a little ambitious is, okay, so like let's get Dauntless 1.0 out the door. Let's get our feet underneath us, and then from there let's start experimenting. And I think that one of the reasons that we try to be so active with feedback is that we want to show the community, like, hey, we're going to experiment and we might fail, but all you have to do is tell us, right? Like all you have to do is say, hey, like you tried this and it didn't quite work, and maybe we need to recalibrate. I think a great example of that was we put out we rejiggered the way potions work, because what we saw was it was like, okay, potions should be something in the game that as you're gathering, you're excited to gather those things. It feels good. It feels significant. It shouldn't just be like a box you're checking as you're running around kicking ass. So the one of the things that we did is we heard that we went a little ham on that. We kind of maybe nerfed the collection aspect of potions too hard, and we were actually able to patch that out in an afternoon as soon as we deployed that. And it's just another example. It's like, well, we experimented, it didn't work, you let us know, we acted, we fixed it. And I think that's the thing. And hopefully what that does is it gives the community the trust. So like in the future, if we try to do something completely new, completely crazy, you guys know that even if maybe it doesn't work right off the bat, that we're willing to work with you guys to make it work.
Yes. And what a quick turnaround time. I hadn't even noticed that. Wow, that was really quick.
Yeah, Jesse doesn't sleep, so that works. That helps.
Yeah, who needs sleep anyway when you're developing a game, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So that brought up a very good point that I was also a little bit curious about. I noticed that there was a gear reset recently, and that is sometimes a hot topic. In beta, I don't think it should be as hot of a topic as it becomes in certain cases, but you know, that is how it is. But there was a reset, and there was a reset because of a gigantic change in the progression system of this game.
Yes.
And that is exactly when an experiment needs testing, which is exactly the purpose, I assume, the reset made, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Is we knew that we wanted to get data on how players were progressing. And you know, I think it can be, I think, you know, you nailed it when you said, you know, this can be a contentious thing, and we completely understand and respect why it can be contentious. If you invest a lot of time in the game and you feel really accomplished, you know, it's important to you to not want to lose that progress. That being said, you know, I hope that people who feel like maybe they lost something in the exchange appreciate that when we look at the data for the game, we don't just go like how many people completed the new progression system or how many people advanced or, you know, whatever it is. We look and we say, okay, of the people who have played before that made it to end game, how many of them did XYZ? Of the people who played before and struggled, is it better for them? Is it worse for them? So, you know, every time the game gets reset, like maybe you're losing temporary progression, but you're helping the game so immeasurably because we're able to track your progress over time, and that teaches us so much. It teaches us so much, and we can use that information to make the game better and better and better. So even if maybe your inventory gets cleared out, just know that really what's happening is we're compressing your experience into fuel to make the game that much better.
Yes, exactly. And so with this, how do you go about analyzing data without getting entirely too technical?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Or you can actually. I kind of enjoy that. So
I know you do.
what kind of do you have internal tools to analyze your data, or do you have homegrown stuff? And what kind of stuff do you collect? Like what are some of the most interesting things that you collect?
Sure. So we do. We use both. So we're really lucky to have a very data oriented, but maybe not necessarily driven team. So the thing that's always important to us is that the game is fun and that you feel good playing the game. I think, you know, there are a lot of games, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to disparage any games, but I think that there are a lot of games on certain platforms, like social networks, where you see that data is the only thing driving design, right? Where it's like, well, this mechanic is really fun, but it makes it harder to get money out of people, so therefore it's got to come out. We're never going to do that. It's important to us that we make a really fun game and then figure out how to make ends meet, because we believe in the art of what we do as well as the craft. So we're very data oriented, though. It's important to us that, you know, like you can't say like, did we do this? Did it make everyone's life better? And then just go, yep. Why? Because we decided it's better for us, therefore it's better for everyone, right? Like you need data to validate your assertions. We're really lucky that there is a passion for that kind of thinking inside the studio, and as a result, we're really excited to do things like build our own tools. So like we've built our own customer support tools. We've built some of our own email tools. Because we have the expertise and the passion to do that. And a lot of those projects get done on the weekends. As a result, so one of the terms I'm going to use here is telemetry. Telemetry is basically just the recording of what happens inside the game. So like you hit the Behemoth, it creates a telemetry event, which we can then use as a data point. So, you know, every time you hit a Behemoth, every time you walk somewhere on the island, every time you craft something, every minute you play, we collect that data. We do so. We don't share that data. It's very, very important to us that your privacy is respected. It's one of the things that I really admire about our company leadership is that we are very, very pro privacy. We're very much interested in using any data that we collect anonymously and responsibly. But we use tools like Tableau. We use tools. I think you'd be surprised how many people in the studio are using SQL on a daily basis to organize and learn more about data. We have dashboards, so there are multiple televisions up inside the studio that there are multiple television studio that have different dashboards on them, so we always know what's happening in the game. We can see the trends of what's happening. You can tell, oh, I made a change in the game. Did it have the intended effect? Did it have an unintended effect? And we can track all of that. And then we have a dedicated resource within the studio, a dedicated person who their entire job is to, someone walks up and says, hey, I have a theory. My theory is that, this is in the game and it's causing people to do this. Can you help me validate my assertion? And
Whoa.
It's that person's job to work with us to figure out whether or not the data is telling us that, or whether or not maybe it's something else. So
are they called the Royal Fact Checker?
His name is Gavin, and we can call him the Royal Fact Checker. He is very handsomely dressed and dapper, so there is an air of regality about him.
I love this. I'm loving it.
Yes, I think you can tell a lot about a person based upon what they keep on their desk. Nick, my closest coworker, keeps a fight stick and a Street Fighter statue on his desk because he's a big fighting game guy. I like to have a lot of pins and little gaming memorabilia because I'm a gaming culture guy. Gavin has calculus and statistics books on his desk. I don't know that I have any books in my house that have numbers in them. I think Gavin only has books that have numbers in them. So, that's who he is as a person, and we wouldn't change him for the world.
Oh, wow. I could not think of a better person to have as a data-driven fact checker. I just think that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic.
So let's talk about some things that normally aren't talked about. What kind of games are played around the office, and do you feel like any of that is ever going to rub off on the mainline game on Dauntless?
Oh yeah, I think the games that are always being played, there's always something trendy. Like there's usually someone playing PUBG. We played a lot of Battlefield 1 when it came out. There is a really healthy fighting game community inside the studio that mostly centers around Smash Brothers and Street Fighter 5. Although Nick and I like to play Chaos Code. Super pumped for Chaos Code 2. There was a lot of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. We're going to play a buttload of Dragon Ball FighterZ. We're going to play a ton of Monster Hunter World. I think it's a game that we're passionate about. It's a genre that we're passionate about. I think, it would be hard not to learn a ton from playing that game. That's great. The other thing that we have is, I think we're just going to wait for the server to pick us up. The other thing that we have, too, is we actually have something called Game Club, which is a lot like a book club. And so the idea is that every 2 weeks or so, depending on how busy we are, we pick a game as a group, and then we go and we play it, and then we come back together, we get some beer and some food, and we talk about the game, and we try to learn what we can from playing really, really great games together. And so we've used that to play games like Destiny. We've used that to play games like Inside. We've used to play games like Papers, Please. I think, we're a studio of gamers for gamers, and I don't think there's a genre or a game we couldn't learn something from. And that extends outward also in that we're passionate board gamers, and we're also passionate card gamers. So again, we have our Magic the Gathering club, and we have board game nights. And I think, just we love playing games and we love social experiences. And I think if you gave our group a coin, I think, within an hour, we would have a really compelling social experience that was super fun, based upon just flipping that coin that we could learn something from.
Yeah. Yes, that's perfect. Yeah, because I would say that games like Magic the Gathering, which we've mentioned a little bit tonight, a few times at least, it's almost like a masterclass in design because It's always changing, and it uses and reuses simple concepts over and over in creative ways. And in terms of longevity, it's like one of the longest running games. Period.
It's crazy.
Period.
It's crazy. Yeah, I think of games created in the 20th century, I think there are maybe only a few board games, like maybe Monopoly. It's crazy. And the fact of the matter is, Monopoly is largely the game that it was when it was House of Fortune, I believe. It's largely the same game. Like the Monopoly formula does not change. And then you look over at Magic the Gathering, and Wizards of the Coast is completely happy to turn Magic the Gathering on its head and try something revolutionary within that game space, because that's what they do. So I think for a game that is evolving and changing as quickly as Magic is, and yet still has the longevity, I really don't think you could find another game that can claim that. It's pretty phenomenal.
Right, and the fact that your team is drawing inspiration from that is clearly that can motivate design decisions in this game.
Absolutely.
That is inspiring to hear. I will say that. So I'm not sure what your total availability in terms of time was. So I don't know if it's appropriate to now cut over to Q&A. Probably, I would assume, if you feel that way as well.
Yeah, I could probably do about another half hour.
Oh, that's really great. Okay, yeah, let's see what we can do here. So one of the top questions that we have from chat Q&A is, will there be an aggro mechanic or system implemented? I am also curious.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, and it's a question that we get actually not infrequently. And I can understand why, especially when you get into things like dual behemoth hunts. This is actually one of the things that we heard from... Blunderbutt has leader. Hang on, we're going to tell this guy to pass lead. Pass lead, please. Heart, because people love hearts. You'll see this actually come up in the Your Feedback in Action thread, which is that this is feedback we got this week, over the last couple weeks, which was... hey, I like the dual behemoth hunts. They're super frantic, and it's unlike anything else in the game, but I don't feel like I kind of can influence the behemoths. And so I don't know that we're going to have a traditional aggro system. I don't know how that's going to pan out. But there is a AI that governs how the behemoths behave. And typically right now, the way that the behemoths behave is they use a cooldown system, so they have different attacks that they can use, and those are affected by cooldowns. The cooldowns are, of course, affected by environmental things like stagger, enrage, all those other things. We're gonna have to go back to the city. That's okay. But aside from that, typically what a behemoth will try to do is just the most damage it can. So it kind of looks and says like, oh, if I do this, it's going to attack slayers the most. This will do the most damage to the most slayers. That's kind of typically how they behave. And the reason that they behave that way is that we wanted them to act like animals. We wanted them to act like savage beasts. We wanted them to feel wild. And, maybe some of the behemoths are a little more calculating, but none of them possess, a kind of tactical intelligence. They're all these big creatures.
Right.
That being said, is there room for an aggro system, or is there room for those mechanics? Maybe. And I think it's something that we would want to experiment with. And as long as we don't lose that feeling of, aggression, we don't lose that feeling of kind of a wild encounter, then it'll work out. And at the same time, I think it's also really important to us that we don't go into a kind of quote unquote holy trinity system where it's like there's a healer, there's an attacker, and there's a tank. It's everybody's job to do damage. It's everybody's job not to die.
Yes. And to speak a little bit to the design choices that I've seen thus far, is that you're at least... how do I say this? I think ranged weapons are a very good example of this. I know that ranged weapons are not necessarily something you want in prevalence in your game, but what you creatively did as a team was say, okay, you can have your range, you can have it for a limited time. If you get into a dangerous situation and remain there long enough to get hit, and you deal your damage, as is a good player should, then we'll reward you by giving you an awesome, massive rocket that you can launch right at its face. And we don't want you to do that all the time, but your gameplay, if you do well, you can be rewarded with that. Exactly. I think you nailed it. I feel like that could open up the floodgates for any number of mechanics, which if they were implemented across the board as some sort of a feature, that's just a mundane feature, that would be terrible for the whole game. But instead, it's going to be allowing us to have that ebb and flow of making the player feel powerful and then making the player feel like, oh my God, I have to run, you know, the kind of that Dark Souls type of deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head. I mean, when we talk about the ranged weapon, it's important to us that no one's able to just stand on the outside and do pew 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 pew. Like if you're fighting, you're in the mix, right? And you're putting it all on the line, and that's important to us. So we are actually working on a purely ranged weapon. We're trying to figure out what that weapon is, and how it'll work. And you know, I think we still have a lot of runway to learn from the community using the war pike, using other weapons, what's going to be advantageous.
You just blew my mind. You're working on a pure ranged weapon?
I think like very ranged weapon. Pure might be a little much, but it's going to be very ranged.
What? You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, no, we'll have a very ranged weapon. Again, it's going to be visceral. You're going to have to put yourself at risk to use it, right? It's not going to be the safe weapon. It's going to be a challenging weapon, like all of the weapons are in different ways. But you know, again, like we don't want to rest on our laurels. Like we want to try. We want to push it. We want to push. We want to push what's possible. And so I don't know if that's going to be necessarily the next weapon, but it is something that we're experimenting with. And on a personal note, so our studio, our CEO and studio lead, Jesse Houston, his Twitter handle is GTEZ, GTEZ, and I encourage everybody to spam him on Twitter and demand that the ranged weapon is a boomerang because I want it to be a boomerang.
Boomerang, let's go, citizens! This is your call to action.
Yeah,
it is time. It is time. Yeah. Let's get a boomerang in this game. It makes sense because like Aboriginal like monster hunting, right? Like there you go. That makes so much sense to me.
See, you get it.
Oh man, I'm all for a boomerang. And moderators, feel free to link that Twitter in chat, if you will. So one thing that is coming from Alil in chat is we have a quote from Mr. D. Yoshi, who says that Alil asked D. Yoshi, he said, can we get a keyboard as a weapon so I can be a keyboard warrior? And D. Yoshi said, who leaked Weapon 6?
Meow, 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 meow. Yeah. No, I one of the things I'm really excited for is when the game is in open beta, when we're feeling you know, that we're really happy with the kind of 1.0 version of the game, to start to put some Easter eggs in, to start to put some fun stuff in the game. We have a really creative, fun group of people, and I know that we're going to come up with some really cool, silly stuff, you know, in moderation, in tasteful moderation, and so I'm excited for us to kind of horse around like that.
Yes, absolutely. I personally am a proponent of kigurumis, as you know. Any costume pajamas that could make their way into the game, you have a guaranteed customer in me. If it happens,
you look so comfortable.
Always. Yeah. Comfort in all things.
I thought of you because my wife, the company she works for, as a Christmas present, they mailed everybody sweatshirts. But the sweatshirts they mailed out, there was some kind of confusion, and they're in like Gigantor size. So I am wearing a small that is probably like an XXL. I don't know if they're supposed to be more like bathrobes or something, but I thought of you because I put it on and just kind of was like, it has thumb holes in the sleeves, and I have a little hood, and I was just kind of like, oh, this is what it's like to be Tritemare. This is deeply comfortable.
And I think Jesse himself was like, yeah, I could see a Drask Kigurumi in the game, and I was like, yes, okay, now we're talking. Actually, and also in terms of merchandise, you know, I would buy one of those IRL. Yeah. All right, so the next question from Q&A are there are excuse me, let me read the question before I Okay, are there plans for making breaks more significant to combat across the board? Some behemoths visibly lose body parts and have their attacks change, while others just get deep scratches. Will behemoths for whom breaks don't do very much get some effect to them later?
Yeah, I think it's actually I'm really happy to hear that question, because that's exactly the kind of thinking we want to hear. So, part of what is part of one of the things you ask yourself. Uh, I mean, I'm not on the design team, but one of the things the design team thinks about is, what does high level play, what does mastery look like for my game? So what separates a someone who's never played from someone who's played a few hours, from someone who's played 100 hours, from someone who this is their game? What is that differentiating factor? And part of that is the knowledge, and it's great because it makes sense both within the world of the game and it makes sense as a gamer, that the knowledge of how the behemoths work, the knowledge of their attack patterns, the knowledge of these parts alters the way that you interact with them. And we want to reward players who understand how part breaks work and how that's going to how that's going to impact combat. We want to reward them by making those changes evident, apparent, and impactful. And so I know that's something that we're always looking at. For some of the behemoths, it makes more sense for them to maybe not like Shrike is a great example. Like, you can break Shrike's legs. They don't come flying off because that would be sad and weird and gross. But it does change his attack pattern. It does change some of his abilities. Making those changes evident and apparent and impactful is something that we're always going to be looking at. So a great thing to do is go to the forums, go to Reddit, or go wherever you're comfortable leaving feedback, even if it's in 280 characters on Twitter, and say, hey, when I fight this behemoth, it feels really good because XYZ. But when I fight this behemoth, it doesn't maybe feel as good because XYZ. And just give us that feedback, and we will absolutely look into it.
I think we might have gotten separated in party.
No!
Is it okay? I didn't make it to the island. Is it okay if you drop and rejoin me in town?
And would be the same without you.
Thanks so much. Would you also toss me an invite? You can be lead.
Okay.
I feel like me being lead might not be superstitiously good for us.
I think you're great. I think you're wonderful.
Thank you. All right, let's keep reading these. The next question looks like this. What are the chances of pack hunter monsters, like a group of 3 to 4 or more smaller agile monsters to fight, comparable to player size and speed? Yes, I've heard this one before. This one's a little bit more common. Go ahead and let her rip.
Yeah, I think that's, again, you're totally right. This is a question we've heard before. I don't think there is necessarily anything from stopping us from doing it, but obviously, we talked a little bit about Behemoth AI and Aggro systems, and maybe gave a little insight into how that works. And I think that could probably shed some light onto the challenge that would be. I think that what I'm part of what I'm really excited for as the community manager is finding ways to expose the community to how we think about things and how the game comes together, so that the feedback that they give and the questions they ask are that much more relevant and that much more informed. So I think it's extremely obvious to everybody why a game like Dauntless doesn't have a first-person mode where you whip out a rifle and you can shoot things. That doesn't make any sense. I think even a layman can understand the design challenge that presents. I think what's been interesting to me over the last 10 years of working in the industry is gamers are so passionate, they're so knowledgeable, they have so much information, they spend so much time on the internet learning. But I think that because game design is inherently always changing and it's pretty difficult, there's can sometimes be a little bit of a canyon between what players ask for and kind of what is possible. And so a pack animal is one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you just make a behemoth and you control T and you resize it to different shapes a little bit, and then there's 4 and you hunt them and you kill them, right? And on paper it's like, okay, yeah, that should be easy. But what you guys can't see, if we're doing it right, because you don't want to see the seams, is how a behemoth actually comes together, how they're actually built. Is that physically possible in the engine? Does that actually work with how weapon systems work and how Ikinema works and how level design works? And it's a tricky question because it sounds like a very straightforward question, but it's actually a very, very big question. It's a smart question. It's an interesting question. It's a question that should absolutely be asked, and hopefully I'm doing a somewhat decent job of answering. But I think to answer the question directly outside of the, the meta answer, it's possible. It's pretty unlikely that we'll do that in the near future, again, because it would require such an expansion in the way that we think and design. But that's not to say that it can't happen. It would just require a lot of work to make it possible.
Right. And like the other aspect of that is like, yeah, you basically said it yourself. Yeah, we could totally create a bunch of fodder to be out there and give you a hard time while you hunt. But then it starts dominoing in terms of impact, because it's like in this game right now, we're setting up and trying to control match duration and match length. Matches aren't to exceed 30
Exactly.
minutes. And we got stuff to gather on this map. So you throw in a bunch of little nuisances to us, and then you got match length timeout increases in the next patch, and people are complaining, like it's going to domino. Like just one little addition to the game can domino affect the whole.
Yes. And I think the other thing too is that, we just had a really great meeting today about the tutorial and how we can make the tutorial better, using what we've learned from the community and using new tools that are available to us. And, one of the things that comes up, right, is you go, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if ... And, what you don't know is that the person who's working on our UI is over there working on something, and they're like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if ... And when those things align, when it's serendipitous, that's great, because everybody gets a little bit of what they want. But there's also a challenge in that everybody has an idea, everybody has a passion, everybody has a creative spark. And in order to make sure that we're exploring new things and being artistically adventurous, everyone needs the flexibility to pursue those things. So the trick is, it seems counterintuitive that if everyone gets to go creative in different directions, it's like, well, surely this will just make something more creative. But it can actually kind of bind you and create this kind of weird knot situation. So it's really important that everybody kind of agrees on a creative direction, and then we all move forward in that direction together.
Yeah. Well, so let's change gears here for a second, but only very slightly. Let's change gears from teeny tiny little behemoths to gigantic behemoths.
To the big boys.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, the big old boys that we have today, how large are we considering making them? Like, am I gonna be able to get on the back of one of these guys and
yes,
and like go to like have a platform to run up and like smack down some body parts? Or I don't know.
I am also a Shadow of the Colossus fan.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, I think I think Horizon Zero Dawn did this so well. It's one of those things, like, we know, like, and looking at Neo, looking at Horizon Zero Dawn, looking at Monster Hunter, you see these really great grappling mechanics, these really great up close and personal kind of mechanics. That is it's not like changing the color of the paint on your car or adding a spoiler. It's like replacing upgrading from like a V6 to a V8, right? Like it's a lot more work than it seems. And so it's one of those things where it's like, man, we would love to do that, but there are other things. Before we replace the V6 with the V8, let's make sure we've got 4 tires on this thing. And I think that's kind of where we are right now. And so that's not to say that we don't want to have huge behemoths, because there are definitely ideas about huge behemoths that have been batted around. But the thing that's really important to us is that, like, so we're fighting Skarn here, right? And realistically, there's only so much of the behemoth that you can hit. There are parts of the behemoth, like the tippy top of that rock up on his back. Like, yeah, sure, you could hit it, but like,
challenge
in a normal
accepted.
fight,
I just hit it.
Yeah, exactly. But in a
I'm a
normal
hammer.
fight, like, you don't really think about it, right? You just think about, like, what's the best attack, and you get in there and do it. So it's important to us that if we have really, really big behemoths, that you're not just like whacking it in the ankles the entire time, like that. You feel like you're engaging with a large creature in ways that are significant, and so that involves more than just like making a behemoth big. It involves thinking about what are the mechanics that we need to make it so that you can interact with those parts. What are the coming back again to the question of break parts. If we make a super duper huge behemoth and you're able to break its legs and it limps, what does that do to the encounter? These are really, really big questions. They're questions that we're excited to explore, but they're really, really big questions.
Yes, and I'm just seeing a lot of questions related to Behemoths, which makes sense. I'll just tackle the final one. It's another one. This one, let's really just gloss over this so we can talk about things that haven't been spoken a lot about in the public eye for this. But you've heard this one. I've heard this one. Let's hit it real quick just because it came up in chat.
Real quick.
It's diversity of behemoth species. That is more or less the question. This user is speaking about how rogues are similar in stature, color, and form to earlier or later behemoths, etc. Scrave versus Skarn, or excuse me, Scrave versus Shrike business.
Yeah.
Let's quickly just gloss over that.
Sure. I think that, we are going to have more diversity. Dauntless is a game that's going to grow and change over time. As you've alluded to, this game's going to operate for years, and part of that is going to be adding new behemoths. The other thing, too, is, making games isn't just about making behemoths. It's also about making the tools that we use to make behemoths. So the longer we go, the more tools we have to make behemoths, the more quickly we'll be able to iterate and create new and exciting things. So, yeah.
Thank you. So now let's go ahead and lean into another question from chat that I gathered last week. This young individual from chat was a 3D artist, and this 3D artist trying to get on into the industry asked me this question. He asked, would a studio such as Phoenix Labs consider someone who is not immediately adjacent to a studio in terms of an application submission? Now, I believe this person is in New Zealand, and I don't know if relocation is a thing for them or where they're located, but I think they live in a place where relocation is generally difficult.
Sure. There have been huge advances in our ability to rotate art. So obviously, if you're in New Zealand, all of the art that you create is upside down. We are able to rotate that art, so that's at least one less thing to worry about.
Oh, thank goodness. The technology just keeps impressing me.
Life just gets better all the time. We do have people that work remotely for the studio. I think the trick is less about your physical look. I mean, obviously, we're working with Dayoshi. He's doing some community stuff with us.
He's in Australia,
I
right?
think that, but I think part of it is it's less about location and maybe more about seniority. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say seniority. I should say experience. So I think when you're starting off, especially as an intern, or you're starting off as a more junior person, you typically kind of need a little bit more proximity, only because that's really how you learn, about how to work with a team. Really, I would say over the course of my career, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree to this, learning what you do is really only half the battle. Learning how to do it, learning about the environment in which you do it, that's learning how to work somewhere is as much important as what you learn working there. And I think that especially when you're very, very junior, you're just getting started, that experience is so important. So I don't know if a junior position would work out for that, but that's not to say that you couldn't share your art with us, and we would give you feedback. We have some our concept artist is largely self-taught, and she can give you a ton of great feedback. She's a very passionate, giving person in that way. If she's listening, I'm sorry, I just signed you up for that, but I'm banking on the fact that you're so sweet. So I think you might be better off, and I know it can be hard if you're in a place like New Zealand, to find a studio or find an opportunity where you can either work remotely or find a place to work. But I would say, the smaller the studio, the kind of harder it is to work remotely with less experienced people. That was a very long answer. That was a little rambling. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's good. It's good. There's a lot of industry folk out there who want to get in, or there's a lot of folks.
I mean,
out there.
the best advice I will give people to get into the industry is be prepared. Have your portfolio ready to go. Have your business card ready to go. Have your website ready to go. Have your resume ready to go. I got into the industry. I was a music major in college. I was working in a GameStop at the mall because I like video games. And there was a local game studio, and they came in to buy games all the time, and I was super cool to them because I thought it was super cool that they worked on games. And one day, one of them asked me if I wanted to help them out as an entry-level customer support person. That is how I got into the industry. But the reason that I got in is because she gave me her card, and I had my resume to her, and a cover letter, and an explanation of what I wanted the next day. You know, so as a rule, I try to give people that want to get into the industry, I try to connect them to other people. I try to help them get in because I was very lucky to get in, and so I try to help people get in. It would shock you how many people I talk to who I say, great, just send me your resume, who I never get the resume from. It would shock you how many people are like, oh, I do art. It's like, oh, great, you have a portfolio? Oh, no, I don't have a portfolio. And I'm inspired by everybody I meet. I'm excited by the people that I meet. But, you know, to be frank, I got a lot going on. And if I talk to you at a party, and by the time I get back to my hotel room, I've got your portfolio in my inbox, I'm going to remember you. 100% going to remember you. If I don't get your portfolio for a month and a half, I'm going to have a harder time putting a face to a name. So if you want to get in, be ready. Have your stuff ready to go, and don't look down your nose at any opportunity. If it's QA, if it's customer support, you know, maybe it's not where you want to start, but making a game is a ton of work. It's a huge endeavor, and if you're willing to work hard and play as part of a team, somebody will be happy to have you.
Well put, my friend. Well put. Now, here's two questions that could probably be answered in quick succession. I'll start with this one. It's a party-sized question. It is more a question aimed at will there be any behemoths that are in a raid format, meaning more than 4 people, or even larger in certain cases? Is the 4-person party encounter going to be expanded upon? Are we going to have the opportunities to play with larger groups?
Yeah, maybe. I think it ladders up again, kind of into like the extra fun size behemoth question, where we really want to nail the core, and then once the core is nailed down, then we'll see. We've done some experiments. It's definitely interesting, and like the idea of dual behemoths originally was kind of an idea that we weren't super sure about, and they just experimented with and kind of got it figured out. So nothing's impossible, but I think that there are other ways to expand the game beyond just like bigger behemoths, more players. There are other things that we want to add to the game, different activities for the islands, different kinds of quests. There are all these things that we can add that work within the kind of current parameters that I think would add so much more to the game. And then once we've kind of tapped out that avenue of exploration, then sky's the limit. We can investigate whatever we want.
Nice. Next up, there was a question about mobility in the game. Are there any plans to allow players to move in the vertical? And are there any designs for maps that will accommodate that, or are there any? It's a kind of a multi-pronged question here. I'm sorry. Let's just cover movement first. How are there plans to spice up the movement system in any way, shape, or form?
I think we've. If you look at the roadmap, you'll see that there is some consideration going into aerial combat. What exactly that entails is largely an element of what needs to actually be investigated. So we're going to be looking at that. Again, obviously when you look at the maps, there are already some kind of vertical elements. Whether those are working well and really add a ton to the game is debatable. And it's something, and when I say debatable, I mean that we want your feedback on that. Because I think it works well for what it is. It's just the question is, how much more do we want to add? I think that vertical combat will be our first foray into that, and once we have a kind of verticality of combat, then the verticality of exploration and islands becomes a lot more relevant.
Nice. This is very, I don't know, but this is so strange. I never expected a question this granular. Okay, I'm going for it.
Get in there.
Everbloom plants. Currently they spawn and they look like all other potion plants, but they do not seem to have an associated recipe. Can we confirm if a use for them is impending anytime soon, also for other plants that currently don't have crafting uses?
That is a very, very good question. That is a very granular question, and I do not know the answer to it. I don't know. I can find out. Let me ask right now.
Oh, shoot, you're asking right now? Awesome.
I'm asking right now. Okay, Arcanonal. Is there a use for Everbloom? And if not,
kudos.
Will there be one soon?
Yeah, kudos to whoever asked that question. Very, very astute. I think they're seeking an Easter egg.
I see. I do not think that there is a Easter egg involved, but
it was worth a shot. All right, so I'm gonna keep on going. Are there any plans for a collaboration, cameo, or tribute event or Behemoths in the future? For example, because I do need an example of this one too. So for example, promotions referring to other games or companies or cultures. Example,
sure.
Hold on, they actually provided a third example. Example, Monster Hunter and their love of USJ. I don't know what USJ is. Can you clarify this for me?
USJ. USJ.
Is it a company in the lore there that they keep referring to, like Capsule Corporation from DBZ, or is it different?
Let's see here. The internet says Universal Studios Japan.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know there was a Universal Studios in Japan. Okay. So
apparently there is, and it has a Monster Hunter exhibit. Yeah, I mean, we want to. I think there's a couple questions in there. One is like, does the world of Dauntless reach out into the world in other ways besides the game? That's something we would be really excited about. A lot of people that work on our game at Phoenix Labs came from places like Riot and BioWare, working on Mass Effect, and so those are big worlds that have expanded elements like comic books and other ways of exploring the universe that the game occupies, and I think that's something that we would be excited to explore. The other question, right, is then, does the real world poke into the game in any way? Like, are there promotional items from other games or from other developers or from real world things? That's a really, really good question. I think like the prototypical example is like Shovel Knight. Like, I think you can now play a Shovel Knight in every game ever.
Right.
Would we ever have Shovel Knight weapons and armor? I don't know. I think we kind of, for now, want to keep an eye on the prize, which is perfecting the Shattered Isles and perfecting Dauntless. But that's not to say that we're closed off to that idea. It's not to say that we couldn't explore that in the future.
Yeah. If you do, now I've never even thought of this. But wow, what an interesting concept. I had no idea. But you know what? The guys over at Turtle Rock who did Evolve, gosh, it'd be somewhat fun to go up against a Goliath in this game.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah,
but
I really liked Evolve.
Me too. Evolve was a really, really captivating game for me. It really captured my heart. I sank in the hours. I really loved the community, but at some point in time, I feel like the external forces weighed down on that game a little too hard. I don't think its undoing was its own. If that makes any sense. I don't think it was its own. It was its perception. Because there were a lot of nasty perceptions in that game that simply weren't grounded in reality. And not until a much, much, much later date did any of those nasty rumors ever even come partially into fruition. But it was... things got leaked and things got labeled too soon to where the game never could get to its maximum potential, which was really sad, I feel like.
Yeah, I think it was a really cool game, and like you alluded to, had some really, really, really cool creature design.
Yeah, it was excellent. All right, so let's keep talking. Let's see, what's the next question? So, how much of the game resources can Phoenix Labs legitimately direct to optimization? There seems to be so much work on everything else, and else still that is on the back burner. Optimization? I'm not sure if... all right, so I'm going to interject. Personally, I don't think optimization has been on the back burner at all. Every patch, every hotfix, and they are frequent, comes out with some optimization, and I think it's an ongoing pursuit. But yeah, how does that work in terms of commitment? Is there an active optimization team
That's a great question.
Inside?
There's not an optimization team. It's well, I should say there are people whose a large part of their work impacts optimization, and a large part of what they think about is optimization. And those people, the only reason I can't speak more to precisely what they do is that it is very technical, and as far as I'm concerned, they are warlocks. So the thing with optimization is that what's the best way to put this? So, like, let's take Ramsgate for example. So, one of the ways, and again, don't take this verbatim because this is in large a layman understanding of the process. So you're standing in Ramsgate. I will come to your flare and use your flare too.
Hey, look.
It looks so good.
Thank you.
One of the things, right? So you're standing in Ramsgate, and your computer needs to load the buildings, and it needs to load the texture on the buildings, right? And however many buildings you can see, your computer needs to load that. And the game tries to figure out, okay, what buildings need to load based upon what you can see. So if you're in the very, very front of Ramsgate, the game is probably not going to worry so much about the building that's all the way in the back corner that you can't see unless you walk, halfway across the city, right? Now, that being said, that assumption is predicated on the city being in its final configuration. So part of the reason that the city maybe does not run as well optimized as other parts of the game is because the city is largely subject to change, and in terms of its layout and how it functions, right? So, like, if we take the time to optimize the city, that optimization is not necessarily going to carry over to a newer version of the city, right? It's not like, oh, we optimized the buildings, therefore no matter what configuration we put the buildings in, it's going to be great. A large part of optimization is dependent upon things being in an order and structure that represents your target release. And there are still a lot of elements of the game that we're tinkering with and we're still experimenting with. And if the people who are largely in charge of optimization put effort and work into optimizing the game, would it make for a smoother beta experience? Yes. But it would also make for an ultimately smaller beta experience because they would be spending their time on things that were not more content, that were not new avenues for experimentation and growth.
Got it. Okay, so there have been commitments towards it, but there hasn't been able to be a full tilt dedication because of needing to handle other things that are getting prioritized.
Correct.
Yeah.
And just because, it's like, to go back and use the car analogy, it's like, okay, if you're going to put a car together, you probably don't want to vacuum the seats. That's not the first thing you do, right? You want to put the car together, you want to get it painted, you want to get it tuned up, you want to get the engine running, and then the last thing you want to do is vacuum the seats, because otherwise you're just going to keep re-vacuuming the seats every step of the way, right?
Very well put. Very well put. All right, let's take a look at the next one. How have the sharpen your skills changes affected the appearance of interrupts in normal play? And is that going to be rarer, or more rare, I guess, or is the intent that interrupts will be easier for those who risk it for the biscuit?
Ooh, this person sounds like a Chainblades user, which, shout out, that's cool. And if you're not, then that's still cool. You're still cool in my book. So yeah, I think, with Sharpen Your Skills, we changed the moveset that was capable of interrupting. We namely reduced it, and we tuned it up a little bit more after some player feedback. But what we saw, right, is that, like, we want different attacks to have impact and meaning, right? So, like, what you never want to do is get into a place where it's like there is an optimal combo at all times, a single optimal combo, and what you're doing is you're either landing that combo or you're not, right? Like, fight complexity should be about being dynamic and recognizing which attacks are right for the right moment in the game.
Right.
And so what we saw, right, is that being able to interrupt with every attack made it so that most people just spam that attack because interrupting is typically the best way to get your licks in. And so we changed what could interrupt and the way that some interrupts worked. And the really interesting thing is, yeah, like we see less interrupts in the earlier stages of the game, but we actually see more interrupts and maybe even some stagger chaining, which we need to take another look at in the later stages of the game, thanks to cells. So like if you get like the stagger cell on your sword, you can two people with that stagger cell going up against certain behemoths, you're basically fighting against, you're a cement mixer at that point. So yeah, I think any mechanic like staggers, like breaks, like interrupts is always going to be something that we're tuning and taking a look at, because they're so impactful. And they're a big way of how some people choose to play the game. So it's really important that they're rewarding and in balance.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question is regarding cells. About the randomness and adjusting the cell distribution, allowing people to re-roll some bad cells, etc. For example, getting a bunch of umbral attunement cells way before tier 4, before the shroud can even be fought, etc. It would be nice to be able to recycle these cells.
Totally. I would say that like the cell system you're looking at today is probably like version 0.1 instead of version 1.0. I think that what we really want to do is get it out in the wild and let people play with it, so that we could learn about how people are going to use it, and we could make interesting decisions going forward. And that's one of the great things about having an extended closed beta, is that we're able to experiment. So I think that the person who's working on the cell system, I know that they're interested in cell economy. They're interested in things like cell upgrades, resocketing. All of these things are being experimented with and thought about. It really is just an issue of time and the feedback that we get from you guys.
Nice. There was one more question related to what we just spoke about.
Sure.
It was more or less, and we can gloss over this one because we've kind of
Sure.
explained some of it. But more pointed, this is a more pointed question, is how was the decision made to remove staggering from chain blades?
Yeah, like I said, I think it was just one of those things where we saw people who were spamming the right click or Y attack, because it was like, well, I'll either hit them or stagger them, and it didn't feel very tactical. And the other thing we saw too was people using the chain blades that were kind of filling that melee or ranged role, where they weren't really engaged in the fight, they weren't really interacting with their teammates. That is an ability you can get back with the stagger cell. And I think what we want to do is say, look, right now there's one right way to play the chain blades, and that is to interrupt. Period. Right? Like you have the safety, you have the mobility to interrupt constantly, and for most theory crafting, that was the way to play the chain blades. And again, like that's something we want to avoid. We don't want to have just one right way to play. And so what we did is we looked around and said, okay, the cells are really about diversifying, your capabilities and your intentions in combat. And I think what we'd much rather see is, like, if you want to be a interrupt focused chain blades player, you can spec into that. But otherwise that's not the requirement. That's not the job of the chain blades, is to interrupt.
Got it. Thank you. The next thing is, what are the plans for the cash shop, and how will you balance paid content with rewards achieved in the game?
Yeah, so the cash shop right now is largely placeholder. The prices are placeholder. The way that you get platinum is placeholder in large. I mean, like, obviously you buy it. But it's important to us that you can get rewards for playing the game that feel great. If you want to support our studio and purchase things in the cash shop, we want that to feel great, and we want those rewards to feel special. It's also important to us that you can't pay to win, and you can't buy power, and that is really a cornerstone of Dauntless. I mean, like, skill is a cornerstone. I don't think anyone would accuse Dauntless of being an easy game, and we don't want people to buy their way out of that.
Thank you so much. Let's see here. This one's the same vein, about colors. Aside from buying Style Hunter, is there... Hold on, the line just changed. Oh, yep. Is there an intended path for players to not be stuck with the same palette as everyone else?
Yeah, I think a big part of it right now, right, is there's a limited number of dies. And the reason that there's a limited number of dies is just, believe it or not, it's a pretty significant amount of work to hook those dies up and get them all working. And the decision kind of comes down like, okay, like right now, our goal is not to get people to buy dies. Our goal is to get people to play the game, to give us the feedback that we need, and to help us experiment. So, does putting more dies in the game really accomplish that right now? Not really. So that wasn't the focus of what we did. In the future, you're going to see not only more colors, but more kinds of dies. So, different finishes and things like that I think will really help you customize yourself.
All right, we're going to stay in the same vein here.
Sure.
Is there a plan to allow more than one flare to be used in a single hunt?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. That's a really cool idea, though.
I feel like that comes from League of Legends pinging, for example.
Oh, yeah, and the smart pings, and then didn't they recently introduce like customizations for smart pings?
I think they did. I'm a little out of touch with that community at this point, but I think they did.
Yeah, I haven't played since last season ?
Right.
But I think there are a lot of things that League does really well in the cosmetic department, and for a game that is very strange to control for most intents and purposes, it's impressive how much they allow you to express yourself.
Yeah, agreed. I feel like another question, I'm going to go ahead and build off of the one that we just heard, even though I haven't received this yet. This is one I've heard a lot, is will we be able to change armor mid-hunt?
Probably not. At least that is not the current intention. I think that part of it, right, is like you want to go out, you want to get really focused, you want to call the shot and roll with what you got. That being said, like if we see like a really good use for it, if we see a really huge desire for it, it's not to say that that's not something that we can think about again. I think that just right now the game works well without being able to do that. So.
Agreed. All right. So furthermore, all right, here's a fun one. When will Kigurumi armor get put into the game? All right.
Hey.
Ayo. The next thing is general interest in new / upcoming weapons. Maybe mention that this in general. Oh, sorry. I'm reading like other notes in there.
Oh, sure, it's fine.
How about them new weapons?
Yeah, the Warpike. The Warpike has been really, really great. I think the Warpike has made it so that people kind of get a taste of that range combat, like you were saying. I think having piercing damage has been really cool, and it's added a complexity to the way team play works, and we're just excited to keep learning from what people are doing with the new weapon and use it to make even more cool weapons.
And also, Weapon 6 is confirmed keyboard, and Weapon 7 is confirmed boomerang. We know this.
Or maybe it's just a boomerang keyboard.
I never even thought.
You type out what you want to hit, and then you throw it, and it hits it, and it comes back to you.
Don't let the military get a hold of this, because it'll be designed, and it's a weapon too dangerous for this world.
Yeah.
It's like Death Note with a boomerang. It's just too much. All right. Glossing through, looking at some of these things. Somebody mentioned range weapons. We had discussed that previously. It could be a thing very well. I'm going to scroll down here a bit. Let's see here. When will Warpikes receive personalization for Behemoth design?
Yeah, that should be coming up. We are working on it, trying to get that done as soon as possible. I think we've been working to really backfill the different weapons and armors and make sure that they all feel unique, and we're working to do that as quickly as we can. Nice.
Let's see here. Next one is, are there any plans for a weapon that is based on countering, e.g. maybe a shield and sword focused on shield bashes through countering?
Yeah, we've heard that request. That's one of the very the early requests we got for weapons were a ranged weapon. The other request we got was for a music weapon. Those two requests came together in the unholy union of the harp bow, which is the bane of my existence. Death to harp bow. And then we got a lot of ideas around a gauntlet kind of punching weapon, which is interesting. And then the other big request we got was for kind of a sword and board style weapon. And yeah, countering, I think, obviously would be an interesting mechanic to that end. Whether or not that's the route we want to go, I think is yet to be seen. I think that, again, like the trick is keeping combat very active, making sure that making sure that you're always, putting yourself on the line, not turtling up. There is obviously a way to make counterattacks part of an aggressive strategy, as the Holy Book of Street Fighter 3 Third Strike taught us. But that's a much larger investigation. I think it's really, really cool. Like, I want to encourage everybody in the community to dream big. Like, when you make these suggestions, I can't tell you how cool it is to hear people excited enough about the game to want something like a counter system, to want to find that level of mastery in our game. I think it's super inspiring, it's super encouraging, and I don't want to discourage anybody from suggesting those things. But just know, the bigger you dream, the less likely it is that what we do decide will exactly remember your final vision. But the bigger you dream, the more inspired we get too. So it really is about us. It's about you dreaming big and never holding back, and it's about us, distilling that into the next latest and greatest thing.
All right, cool. I've got 2 wrap-up questions.
Sure.
And then two funnier questions for you. So this one is prevalent. It is discussed openly in our community at this point,
Sure.
and
Sure.
I don't see it stopping anytime soon. So we'll quickly cover it, I suppose. Seeing how close Monster Hunter World is to launch, and just to be clear, it was announced just about a year from now. So not just because when you say the phrase "how close," it means people are going to be like, "Oh, it's next week." Nope. It's about it. It's roughly a year from now. Seeing how close Monster Hunter World is to launch, is there anything planned to keep Dauntless in people's minds? ?
Maybe. Frankly, to be super honest, the thing that enters my mind is how can I do my job and also play as much Monster Hunter as possible? I think the biggest impact Monster Hunter is going to have on Dauntless is that we are all going to call in sick so that we can stay home and play it, just because we're all such big fans.
Sabotage from within. It's
exactly.
Sabotage from within.
If there were a desire from Capcom to sabotage us, which I want to be clear, there's absolutely not. We're really good friends with Yuri, we're really good friends with Sox. One of my favorite things about going to conventions is getting to hang out with the Capcom guys. Yuri is just, he's a prince among men. But if he were so inclined to sabotage us, the absolute worst thing they could do to us would be to send us free codes, because we would all just call in sick and play. I think the most important thing for us right now is to take community feedback and continue to experiment. I think seeing what people are doing, seeing how people are playing is going to be a really big part of it. It'll actually be really interesting to see, if a lot of Monster Hunter people, more dedicated Monster Hunter people, take time off from Dauntless. It'll kind of skew our feedback a little bit, and it'll be interesting to see what that means and maybe how that informs our decisions. But in large, I think we're going to do what we're going to do, which is work on community feedback and continue to upgrade the game.
Yeah, you brought up a very good point about the skew. Wow, yeah, wow. Hadn't thought of that. Very, very interesting. Okay, so next one. Let's see here. Might have lost my place. There it goes. So the simple question is, where do you see Dauntless in 5 years?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the thing that I want the most for this game and its community is that Dauntless is a place that, instead of just saying, when people say what games are you playing, people are when it's oh, tell me, are you a gamer? Cool. What games are you well, I am a Dauntless player. Not I play Dauntless, but I'm a Dauntless player. Because we've created a world that not only is rich and full of things to do and full of activities and full of excitement and challenges, but also that we've worked closely enough with you, the community, to make something that you really feel proud to belong to, and that you feel like you have a brick in Ramsgate somewhere that you helped put there. That's a really, really important thing to us. There's obviously, it means more behemoths, it means more islands, it means more weapons, it means more quests, it means new places to explore, it means things that we haven't even dreamt of yet. But the most important thing to me is that if you are a Dauntless player, that you really feel like you own a part of this game and a part of this community.
I empathize with that to a degree immeasurable. That really resonates with me. And as a broadcaster, my goal is one and the same. This is a kingdom that is built with the participation of all its citizens, it's viewers, right? And without them, I'm literally a fool muttering to himself, I'm a king, I'm a king, I'm a king. And it's just so inspiring to see members hitting subs for 3 years and certain things like that. And when we can be very proud that we have like average sub time of a year like that. If you sub for 1 month, you will likely be sub for a year. And it's a heartening experience. And so I am proud to call myself a Dauntless partner. I am proud to call myself a Dauntless streamer, and I am proud to call myself a Dauntless player. And I hope that each and every one of us feels the same way. I can't tell you how much of this resonates with me. My goodness. Very proud to be here. Very glad to be here.
Well, it's really our pleasure to have you here. I think, we tried to pick people who we knew would be really beneficial to the community and who would stand out and who would be people that we could be proud of. And I think you are absolutely one of those people and always at the vanguard of what makes the game special. And so I want to also say thank you to you because your participation means the world to us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Seriously.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the quick and dirty silly ones. So let's ask, what type of sneakers do you wear day to day? This was a legitimate question from chat.
Ooh, my wife is probably gonna give me a dirty look. I'm a flip-flop man. I like to keep my options and my toes open. I typically don't wear sneakers. I do when I run. I have a pair of running shoes, but day to day, you will largely find me in flippy floppies.
Interesting. Well, now I ask this question: what if you find yourself encountering a behemoth in real life? What would you? How would you do that with behemoths or with toesies? Your toesies exposedies.
Then I can remove one of my chunklas and throw it at the behemoth with great accuracy.
Chunkla. That sounds like a kind of flip flop that a Krogan might wear from Mass Effect.
The chancla is the Hispanic, I think typically Mexican reference word for a flip flop that your madre or your abuela would wear, and usually is used to keep children in line. So, in honor of my Hispanic heritage, I would use the chancla like the weapon that it is.
Oh, that's so good. All right, last question. It perhaps might even be the most hard-hitting of all of them. Who is the best community manager in PC gaming entirely, and why is it Ian Tornay?
That is very, very sweet of you. I honestly don't know if I can claim that. There are a lot of really inspiring community managers out there. There are a lot of people who make my job easy. Those people include you. I think you're an amazing community manager, an amazing entertainer and performer. It's very flattering. I will accept the compliment without running my mouth too much more and just say thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it so very, very much. If you ever desire to sit down and have a powwow again, I'd be honored to have you in the kingdom. I really found this to be very insightful. There were twists, there were turns, there was discovery, there were tears.
It was gorgeous.
Tears. But yeah, seriously, I want to say thank you for that. And I am taking a look around the scape, the environment of our community as it stands, and I was thinking about extending a regular kind of community chit chat up with some of the other content creators, and I'm just like one overlay away from being able to do that on the regular. And
Great.
The Dauntless Discourse is a name that I'm flirting with, but I will probably be doing a regular program that kind of just pulls up at a regular interval that makes good sense for the pace at which we are releasing and patching, and then kind of just do recaps, chat, discuss, and you and Phoenix Labs would be more than welcome to attend at any of those.
Well, we would be honored to be a guest and to be part of that conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you, my friend. I will let you drift softly into this dark night and enjoy your free time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope we get to see you sooner than later.
Absolutely. Too bad I won't be at South, but one of these conventions I'm sure I'll be at.
Perfect. Well, I won't miss it.
Thank you so much, and have a great night, Ian. Let's see some hype in the chat, everybody, for Ian Tornay.
Hype. All right, buddy. I'll see you around.
Bye. That was great. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. You can expect some more Dauntless-related videos coming out soon. I am going to be uploading to YouTube, which is a foreign affair for a king such as I, who live mostly in the streaming realm. I'm going to try to make some tutorials about weapon crafting, weapon wielding. I'm going to try to make some videos about the community in general. So keep an eye out. We will try our best to get some content out there on YouTube. So thank you so much for tuning in. And now we're going to continue with our stream. We're going to be doing some beta key code giveaways, and we're going to start them right now. So I want to reward you all for tuning in right now. And let's get some beta keys out there to you. Let me go ahead and open up my